Have you ever wondered if an engine could be so good that its own manufacturer had to quietly bury it? Because the story you're about to hear isn't just unusual. It flips decades of automotive history on its head. This is the tale of an engine that out-torqued Chevy's beloved V8s, refused to die, and is now rising from the grave to become an internet legend. Today, we dive deep into the mystery of the Chevy 292 inline-six, an engine some say GM wanted the world to forget. Back in the early 1960s, Chevrolet had a problem, one that most carmakers wish they had. America was buying more trucks, hauling heavier loads, and working them harder than ever before. But the engines under those hoods, they weren't keeping up. Chevy needed a workhorse, an engine that wouldn't choke on dust, wouldn't overheat on long climbs, and wouldn't rattle itself apart after thousands of hours of punishment. So in 1962, the turbo-thrift inline-six family was born. It included the 194, the 230, the widely loved 250, and eventually the monster of the group, the 292 cubic inch straight six. On paper, it was designed for one purpose: deliver torque, survive abuse, and work harder than any engine in its class. But here's the twist: Chevy didn't just make a durable engine. They made one of the most overbuilt straight sixes in American history. The 292 didn't simply share parts with its smaller siblings. It stood taller, literally. With a tall deck block, a huge stroke, and a forged steel crankshaft, the engine looked and behaved more like an industrial machine than something you'd drop into a pickup. It even had 7 massive main bearings, giving the crankshaft the kind of support normally reserved for big block engines. Truck owners loved it. Fleet managers trusted it. And mechanics respected it. But Chevy seemed to treat it like the family secret no one wanted to talk about. From school buses to heavy-duty pickups, the 292 quietly did its job year after year, mile after mile. And yet, unlike the V8s, it never appeared in magazine ads, sales posters, or flashy brochures. It was strong. It was reliable. It was a torque beast. But it was never glamorous. And maybe that was exactly the problem. On paper, the 292 didn't scream muscle. It made only around 165 horsepower from the factory. But that number was misleading, because the real magic came from its torque, 260 lb-ft at incredibly low RPM. This wasn't an engine that needed to scream. It didn't need to rev. It didn't need to try. Simply pulled, and pulled, and pulled. Drivers noticed immediately. A 292-powered truck could haul loads just as confidently as many V8 trucks. Going uphill, the 292 sometimes felt stronger. Need to crawl slowly with a heavy trailer behind you? The straight six barely broke a sweat. Truck owners loved it, but V8 owners couldn't understand why this farm engine felt so unstoppable. Meanwhile, mechanics started to discover something else. This engine took mods shockingly well. Turbo kits, dual carb setups, header systems, straight-piped power builds. Every time people tried to push it harder, the 292 simply took the abuse and asked for more. Some tuners were even boring them out past 300 cubic inches and running them in dragstrip sleepers, embarrassing small-block V8s that were supposed to be untouchable. So now the big question started appearing in garages, forums, and eventually TikTok comments. If the 292 was this good, why didn't Chevy promote it? Why did it slowly vanish? And that's where the conspiracy theories began. The running theory goes like this: in the late 1960s and 70s, Chevy was building an empire around the V8 image. Horsepower, noise, muscle, flash. That was what sold cars. That was what made headlines. And more importantly, that was what made money. V8s meant higher margins, premium trims, and a marketing machine built around power and prestige. The 292? It was none of those things. It wasn't loud. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a performance badge. It was a quiet, humble workhorse, reliable to a fault. But that reliability created a problem. A problem big enough that GM allegedly tried to hide its existence in plain sight. Because if your cheap, simple inline-six engine can tow like a V8, haul like a V8, and last longer than a V8, why would buyers bother paying for the V8 in the first place? That's the theory. So while the small block 305s, 350s, and big block 390 SIXS were getting the spotlight. The 292 was pushed into the shadows. Available, but never celebrated. Magazines didn't talk about it. Dealers didn't highlight it. Advertising barely mentioned it. And updates? Almost non-existent. One mechanic even claimed, "It's like GM treated the 292 as a secret backup plan they hoped nobody noticed." Whether or not GM intentionally buried it, we may never know. But the pattern is hard to ignore. It got fewer upgrades than other engines. It was removed from passenger cars entirely. It was limited to work trucks and fleet vehicles. And by the 1980s, it quietly disappeared in the US. Yet the story was far from over. Even though the 292 vanished from American showrooms, it refused to die. GM kept building it for heavy-duty trucks, vans, and utility vehicles into the early 1980s. Pop the hood on a C30 dually, a heavy-duty Suburban, or even some school buses. You'd still find that tall-deck inline-six rumbling away. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flashy. It was trusted. And when GM ended US production, something strange happened. The tooling moved south. Brazil and Argentina kept the 292 alive for decades, powering vehicles like the Chevy Verano and D20 into the early 2000s. While Americans forgot the 292 existed, South America depended on it. That only strengthened the legend. But back in the US, something unexpected began happening in garages. Mechanics, hot rodders, and off-road guys started rediscovering the 292. Small block V8s were getting expensive. LS swaps were becoming complicated. People wanted simplicity again. Something mechanical, something they could wrench on without a laptop. Suddenly, the forgotten inline-six looked like buried treasure. Classic builds from the 50s, 60s, and 70s started popping up with 292 swaps. Stock, turboed, custom intaked, headered, everything. Builders loved the weight distribution. They loved the long, smooth power strokes. They loved the straight six rumble. But most of all, they loved that it was simple. No sensors, no plastic, no fragile electronics. Just cast iron and raw torque. Aftermarket companies noticed. Clifford Performance, Langdon Stovebolt, and others began producing new intakes, cams, headers, pistons, and ignition systems just for the 292. Suddenly, the engine GM hid was getting performance parts again. And it wasn't because of GM, it was the people. And then came the comparison tests. Dynos, real towing, real hills, real trailers. A mildly upgraded 292 was matching, or beating, early 305 and 307 V8s. The internet went crazy. TikTok clips, Reddit threads, YouTube builds, Facebook groups. The 292 became a cult engine. Even people who never owned one wanted one, because it represented an era before software locks and digital headaches. The 250 inline-six always enters the conversation, but the truth is simple. The 250 was good. The 292 was a tank. Taller deck, forged crank, 7 massive mains, longer stroke, heavier rotating assembly, relentless torque. The 250 was refined. The 292 was industrial. That's why hot rodders love it. And that's why it's becoming a legend. So what makes the 292 so fascinating today? Nostalgia, yes, but also practicality. It reminds us of engines we could understand, engines we could rebuild with basic tools, engines built to last. No gimmicks, no software, just metal, torque, and durability. When you fire up a 292, you're hearing history. The sound of an era when engines were built to survive, not be replaced. An era of working-class American engineering. And that brings us back to the big question. Did GM really bury the 292? Maybe not on paper, but in marketing, in visibility, in updates, it sure felt like it was swept under the rug. Too simple, too durable, too capable, too unprofitable. The 292 didn't fit the V8-driven image Chevy wanted. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a performance badge. It was the worker in the background, the engine that didn't ask for attention. And sometimes, those are the engines that become legends. Because while V8s fought for magazine covers, The 292 built something more important, a reputation. So now it's your turn. Was the Chevy 292 an underrated masterpiece? Did GM try to hide it? Or was it simply overshadowed by the muscle car era? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us if you've ever heard one of these straight six beasts in person. And if you love deep dives into hidden automotive history, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we've got plenty more forgotten legends coming your way.